The October wind carried the scent of dying leaves across Highway 65, just outside Nashville. Kenny Rogers adjusted his grip on the steering wheel of his black pickup truck, humming softly to himself as the familiar Tennessee landscape rolled by. At 68, he'd driven this stretch of road countless times, but tonight felt different somehow. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, reminding him of the stage lights from his performing days. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, probably his manager asking about the upcoming benefit concert. Kenny glanced at it but didn't reach for it. These days, he preferred the silence, the space to think. After decades of spotlights and screaming crowds, the quiet moments had become precious. That's when he saw the broken-down car. A rusted blue sedan sat tilted on the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking weakly in the gathering dusk. Steam rose from under the hood like a white flag of surrender. Kenny's foot instinctively moved to the brake pedal. In his rearview mirror, he could see other cars speeding past, their occupants probably too busy to notice or care about someone else's misfortune. But Kenny Rogers had never been too busy for that. He pulled over, gravel crunching under his tires. Through his windshield, he could see a figure hunched over the engine. A man in worn work clothes, his shoulders sagging with the weight of defeat. Kenny recognized that posture. He'd seen it in himself once, long ago when he was just a young man with big dreams and empty pockets. The stranger looked up as Kenny approached, his face weathered by years of hard work and harder times. He was probably in his mid-60s, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that held the kind of weariness that comes from fighting life's battles alone. "Engine trouble?" Kenny asked, his voice carrying the warmth that had made him beloved by millions. The man straightened up, wiping his hands on an old rag. "Radiator's blown, I think. She's been running hot for weeks, but I couldn't afford to fix her." He gestured helplessly at the car. "Should have known better than to push my luck." Kenny nodded, studying the man's face. There was something familiar about him, though he couldn't quite place it. "Where were you headed?" "Nashville. Got a job interview tomorrow morning. First one in 3 months." The man's voice cracked slightly. "Guess that's not happening now." The defeat in his voice struck Kenny like a physical blow. How many times had he seen good people crushed by circumstances beyond their control? How many dreams had he watched die on the side of roads just like this one? "What's your name?" Kenny asked. Robert Patterson." The man extended a calloused hand. "I know this sounds crazy, but you look familiar. You remind me of someone I used to know." Kenny shook his hand, feeling the roughness of decades of manual labor. "Kenny Rogers. And you know what, Robert? You remind me of someone too." Robert's eyes widened. "Kenny Rogers? The singer? No way." He stepped back, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers. I didn't mean to bother you with my problems." "You didn't bother me," Kenny said firmly. "And right now, I'm not Kenny Rogers the singer. I'm just Kenny, and you're Robert, and we're two men trying to figure out how to get you to that interview." The unexpected connection. Kenny pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Hey Mike, it's Kenny. I need a favor." He glanced at Robert, who was listening intently. "I've got a friend with a broken-down car on Highway 65. Think you could send a tow truck and maybe take a look at it tonight?" Robert shook his head vigorously. "Mr. Rogers, I can't let you—" Kenny held up a hand. "Mike, he's got a job interview tomorrow morning. It's important." He paused, listening. "Great, we'll be here." He hung up and turned to Robert. "Mike's got a garage about 10 minutes from here. He's a good man. Won't charge you more than it's worth." "I can't afford much," Robert said quietly, his pride warring with his desperation. "We'll figure it out," Kenny said. "Why don't you tell me about this job interview while we wait?" Robert leaned against his car, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "It's at a construction company downtown. Foreman position. The pay's good. Good enough to get me back on my feet. Maybe even save up for a little place of my own." "You've been doing construction long?" 25 years. Started right out of high school." Robert's voice grew distant. Had dreams of doing something else once, but life had other plans. Kenny studied the man's profile in the fading light. The shape of his nose, the way he held his shoulders. It was like looking at a ghost from his past. "What did you want to do?" "Music," Robert said with a bitter laugh. "Can you believe that?" I wanted to be a musician. Even had a guitar once. Learned to play by ear. But when you're trying to feed a family, dreams don't pay the bills. The word hit Kenny like a sledgehammer. Music. The familiar features suddenly clicked into place, and Kenny felt his world tilt on its axis. Robert Patterson, he said slowly. What was your mother's maiden name? Robert looked at him strangely. Rogers. Why? The ground seemed to shift beneath Kenny's feet. And your father? What was his name? Edward Patterson. He left when I was 12. Mom remarried when I was 15, a man named Kenneth Rogers. He was good to us, but... Robert's voice trailed off as he saw the expression on Kenny's face. Kenny's mouth went dry. Your mother... Was her name Lucille? Robert's face went pale. How could you possibly know that? Because, Kenny said, his voice barely above a whisper. Kenneth Rogers was my father too. The revelation? The two men stared at each other in the gathering darkness, the weight of revelation hanging between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. That's impossible, Robert said finally. I would have known if I had a brother. Kenny sat down heavily on the hood of his truck. My dad left my mom when I was 5. I knew he'd remarried, but I never knew he had other children. He looked up at Robert with eyes that were suddenly bright with unshed tears. I spent 63 years thinking I was an only child. Robert's legs seemed to give out, and he sank onto the guardrail. Mom used to talk about you. She said Kenneth had a son from his first marriage, but she never mentioned your name. And when Kenneth died, we just lost touch with that part of his life. The tow truck's headlights appeared in the distance, but neither man moved. The world had suddenly become a very different place. I used to wonder what happened to you, Kenny said softly. I'd see other kids with their dads, and I'd think about the brother I might have had. I used to make up stories about you, what you looked like, what you liked to do. Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I knew about your music. When you became famous, Mom would point to the TV and say, "That's your stepbrother." But you seemed so far away, like you lived in a different world. I did live in a different world, Kenny admitted. But I never stopped wondering about the family I never knew. The tow truck pulled up behind them, its yellow lights flashing. Mike, a burly man in his 50s, climbed out and approached them. Kenny? You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Kenny stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Robert's face. Mike, this is my brother Robert. I'd like you to meet him. Mike looked confused. Your brother? I thought you were an only child. So did I, Kenny said, his voice thick with emotion. So did I. The night that changed everything. Mike's garage was a warm oasis of light in the darkness. While he examined Robert's car, Kenny and Robert sat in the small office, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between them as they tried to make sense of the impossible. Tell me about your life, Kenny said. I want to know everything. Robert's story unfolded slowly, like a song being played for the first time. He'd worked construction his whole adult life, married young, had 2 children. His wife had died of cancer 15 years ago, and his kids had moved away, caught up in their own lives. He'd been alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have family. I lost my house last year, Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper. Been living in a small apartment above a diner, working odd jobs when I can find them. That's why tomorrow is so important. This job could change everything. Kenny felt a pain in his chest that had nothing to do with his heart condition. While he'd been living in mansions and traveling the world, his brother had been struggling just to survive. I'm sorry, Kenny said. I'm sorry I wasn't there. You didn't know, Robert replied. How could you be there for someone you didn't know existed? Mike appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. Well, the good news is it's fixable. The bad news is it's going to cost about $800 for parts and labor. Robert's face fell. I don't have $800. I do, Kenny said immediately. No. Robert stood up, his pride flaring. I won't take charity. It's not charity, Kenny said firmly. It's family. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither had expected to encounter on this ordinary October evening. I'll pay you back, Robert said finally. Every penny. We'll figure it out, Kenny said. "But right now, let's just focus on getting you to that interview." Mike nodded. "I can have it ready by morning. Why don't you two get some rest? There's a motel down the road." As they walked out into the night air, Robert stopped suddenly. "Kenny, there's something I need to tell you." Kenny turned, seeing something in his brother's eyes that made his heart race. "I know who you are. I mean, I've always known. When you became famous, I used to tell people you were my stepbrother, but nobody believed me. They thought I was making it up." Kenny felt a smile tugging at his lips. "Were you proud of me?" "Every day," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every single day. When I heard The Gambler on the radio, I'd turn it up and tell the guys at work, 'That's my brother singing.' They'd laugh, but I didn't care. I was proud of you." The morning after. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the kind of Tennessee autumn sunshine that made everything look like it was painted in gold. Kenny had barely slept, his mind racing with the implications of what had happened. He'd spent his entire life believing he was alone in the world, and now, at 68, he'd discovered he had a brother. He found Robert in the motel restaurant, staring out the window at the parking lot. "Nervous about the interview?" Kenny asked, sliding into the booth across from him. Robert nodded. "It's been a long time since I've had a real chance at something." He looked at Kenny with eyes that held a lifetime of regret. "I keep thinking about what my life might have been like if I'd made different choices." "You made the choices you had to make," Kenny said. "You were trying to survive, to take care of your family. There's honor in that." "I gave up music for them," Robert said quietly. "My wife, my kids. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd get back to it someday, but someday never came." Kenny reached across the table and placed his hand over his brother's. "It's not too late." Robert looked at him with surprise. "Kenny, I'm 65 years old. I haven't touched a guitar in 20 years. So? I'm 68 and I still play. Music doesn't have an expiration date." Mike called at 8 o'clock to say the car was ready. As they drove to the garage, Kenny found himself studying his brother's profile, still amazed by the resemblance. How had fate brought them together after all these years? "There's something I want to ask you," Kenny said as they pulled into the garage. "What's that?" "After your interview, would you like to come to my place? I'd like to show you something." Robert looked at him curiously. "What kind of something?" Kenny smiled. "You'll see." Chapter 6. The Gift. The job interview went better than Robert had dared to hope. The foreman, a gruff man named Bill Morrison, was impressed by his experience and offered him the position on the spot. As Robert walked out of the construction company office, he felt like he was walking on air. Kenny was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his truck with a smile that could have lit up the entire city. "Well?" Kenny asked. "I got it," Robert said, his voice full of wonder. "I actually got it." Kenny pulled him into a hug that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. "I'm proud of you, brother." They drove to Kenny's house in comfortable silence, both men lost in their own thoughts. When they pulled up to the modest ranch-style home, Robert was surprised. He'd expected something grander, more befitting a country music legend. "It's not much," Kenny said, seeing his expression, "but it's home." Inside, the house was warm and inviting, filled with the memorabilia of a long and successful career. Gold records lined the walls, and photographs of Kenny with other famous musicians were scattered throughout the living room. "This is incredible," Robert said, examining a photo of Kenny with Dolly Parton. "You've had such an amazing life." "I've had a successful life," Kenny corrected. "But amazing, I'm not so sure. Success without family to share it with is just success." He led Robert to a room at the back of the house that had been converted into a music studio. Guitars of every description hung on the walls, and a piano sat in the corner, covered with sheet music. "This is where I come to think," Kenny said, "to remember why I fell in love with music in the first place." He walked to the wall and carefully removed a vintage acoustic guitar, a beautiful instrument with a rich, warm finish. "This was my first guitar," Kenny said, running his fingers over the strings. "I bought it when I was 17 with money I'd saved from working at a gas station. It's been with me through everything, the good times and the bad." He held it out to Robert. "I want you to have it." Robert stepped back, shaking his head. "Kenny, I can't take that. It's too much." "It's not enough," Kenny said firmly. "You're my brother. I've got 63 years of birthday presents and Christmas gifts to make up for." Robert took the guitar with trembling hands. The wood felt warm and alive under his fingers, and when he strummed a chord, the sound was pure and clear. "I don't remember how to play," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sure you do," Kenny said. "It's like riding a bicycle. Your fingers remember, even if your mind doesn't." Robert's fingers found the frets instinctively, and slowly, hesitantly, he began to play. The melody was simple but beautiful, a song that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. Kenny sat down at the piano and began to play along, his fingers finding the harmony to his brother's melody. For the first time in decades, Robert Patterson was making music again. The Brothers' Song. They played for hours, talking and laughing and sharing stories that spanned more than 6 decades. Kenny told Robert about his early days in Houston, about the struggles and the small victories that had eventually led to stardom. Robert shared his own stories, about the wife he'd loved and lost, about the children he'd raised, about the dreams he'd put aside. "I wrote a song once," Robert said as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, "about a man who spends his whole life looking for something, only to realize it was right there all along." "Play it for me," Kenny said. Robert's fingers moved across the strings, and a haunting melody filled the room. The words came slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. "I've been searching all my life for something I can't name, walking down these endless roads playing someone else's game. But today I found the answer in a stranger's kindly face. Sometimes what you're looking for is hidden in plain sight." When the song ended, Kenny sat in stunned silence. The melody was beautiful, but the words were profound, a reflection of their own incredible journey. "Robert, that's beautiful," Kenny said finally. "You have real talent." "Had," Robert corrected. "I had talent. That was a long time ago." "Talent doesn't disappear," Kenny said. "It just gets buried under life sometimes. But it's still there, waiting to be rediscovered." He stood up and walked to his desk, pulling out a piece of paper. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer." Robert looked at him curiously. "I'm planning a benefit concert next month for homeless veterans. It's going to be at the Ryman Auditorium, the Mother Church of Country Music. I want you to perform with me." Robert's eyes widened. "Kenny, I can't." "Before you say no, just listen. I've been performing for 50 years and I've never had anyone to share it with." "Not really?" "Oh, I've had duet partners and backup singers, but never family. Never someone who understood what music really means." Kenny sat back down, his eyes shining with excitement. "We could work on that song of yours, polish it up. And I've got a few songs I've been working on that would sound great with harmony vocals." "You want me to perform at the Ryman Auditorium?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to perform with me," Kenny said. "As my brother, as family." Robert looked down at the guitar in his hands, then back at Kenny. "I haven't been on a stage in 40 years. Neither had I when I first started," Kenny said with a grin. "We'll figure it out together." The rehearsal. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Robert threw himself into preparing for the concert with the same dedication he'd brought to his construction work. Every evening after his new job, he would drive to Kenny's house, where they would rehearse until late into the night. Kenny was amazed by his brother's progress. The years of silence had not diminished Robert's musical instincts. If anything, they had deepened them. His voice had a weathered quality that added poignancy to every song, and his guitar playing had a simplicity and honesty that touched the heart. "You sound like you've been performing all your life," Kenny said one evening after they'd finished running through their set. "I feel like I have," Robert replied. "For the first time in years, I feel like myself again." Kenny nodded, understanding completely. That's what music does. It reminds us who we really are. They had decided to perform 3 songs together. Robert's original song, which they had titled Hidden in Plain Sight, a duet version of The Gambler, and a new song Kenny had written called Brothers Found. "I'm nervous," Robert admitted as the concert date approached. "Good," Kenny said. "That means you care. The day you stop being nervous is the day you stop caring about the music." The night before the concert, they sat on Kenny's back porch, watching the stars emerge in the Tennessee sky. "I keep thinking about Dad," Robert said quietly. "I wonder if he knew this would happen someday." "Maybe he did," Kenny said. Maybe this was his plan all along, to give us each other when we needed it most. Robert smiled. I like to think so. I have something for you, Kenny said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small box and handed it to Robert. Inside was a simple gold ring with the initials KR engraved on the inside. It was Dad's, Kenny said. I found it in his things after he died. I've been carrying it around for 30 years, not knowing what to do with it. Robert slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Now I know what it was for, Kenny said. It was waiting for you. The performance. The Ryman Auditorium was packed with over 2,000 people, all there to support homeless veterans. Kenny had performed at the venue dozens of times, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he wasn't performing alone. Backstage, Robert was pacing nervously, his hands shaking slightly. What if I forget the words? He asked. What if I can't hit the notes? Then you'll improvise, Kenny said calmly. That's what musicians do. We adapt. Easy for you to say. You've done this thousands of times. Kenny placed his hands on his brother's shoulders. Robert, look at me. Do you know why I chose these songs? Robert shook his head. Because they're about us. They're about two brothers who found each other against all odds. When you get out there, don't think about the audience. Think about our story. Think about that night on the highway when everything changed. The stage manager appeared. Mr. Rogers, you're on in 2 minutes. Kenny picked up his guitar and looked at Robert. Ready, brother? Robert took a deep breath and nodded. Ready. They walked out onto the stage together, and Kenny felt a surge of emotion as the audience erupted in applause. But tonight, the applause wasn't just for him. It was for them, for the brothers who had found each other. Good evening, Nashville, Kenny said into the microphone. I want to tell you about a miracle that happened to me a few weeks ago. The audience settled into respectful silence. I was driving home from a meeting, minding my own business, when I saw a broken-down car on the side of the road. Now, I've driven past a lot of broken-down cars in my life, but something told me to stop. And when I did, I met a stranger who turned out to be the brother I never knew I had. The audience murmured in amazement. I'd like you to meet Robert Patterson, my brother, my family, and tonight, my musical partner. Robert stepped forward, his nervousness evaporating in the warmth of the crowd's welcome. We're going to perform 3 songs for you tonight, Kenny continued. The first is an original song that Robert wrote many years ago. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight, and it's about finding what you're looking for in the most unexpected places. The opening notes of the song filled the auditorium, and Robert's voice, clear and strong, began to tell their story. I've been searching all my life for something I can't name, walking down these endless roads, playing someone else's game. But today I found the answer in a stranger's kindly face. Sometimes what you're looking for is hidden in plain sight. When the song ended, the audience was on its feet, applauding wildly. Kenny looked at Robert and saw tears streaming down his face. How does it feel? Kenny asked quietly. Like coming home, Robert whispered. The legacy. The concert was a massive success, raising over $200,000 for homeless veterans. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in both men's lives. Robert continued working his construction job, but his evenings were now filled with music. He and Kenny wrote songs together, performed at local venues, and slowly built a following of their own. 6 months after their first meeting, Robert moved into the guest house on Kenny's property. For the first time in either of their lives, they had family close by. I keep thinking about all the years we lost, Robert said one evening as they sat on the porch. Don't think about the years we lost, Kenny replied. Think about the years we've gained. They had been working on a new song, a duet that told the story of their reunion. Kenny had titled it Brothers on the Highway, and it was destined to become their signature song. I want to record it, Kenny said. I want to make an album with you. Robert looked at him in surprise. You're serious? Dead serious. I think we have something special here, Robert. I think we have a story that needs to be told. The album, when it was released 8 months later, was a critical and commercial success. The title track, Brothers on the Highway, became a country music standard, and the album itself went platinum. But the real success wasn't measured in sales or awards. It was measured in the quiet moments they shared, the music they created together, and the family they had built from nothing. The circle complete. 5 years after that fateful night on Highway 65, Kenny and Robert were preparing for their farewell tour. Kenny's health was declining, and they had decided to retire from performing while they could still do it on their own terms. The final concert was scheduled for the Ryman Auditorium, bringing their story full circle. "Any regrets?" Robert asked as they sat in the dressing room before the show. Kenny thought for a moment. "Just one," he said finally. "I regret that it took us so long to find each other." "But we did find each other," Robert said. "That's what matters." "You're right," Kenny said, standing up and picking up his guitar. "We found each other when we needed each other most." They walked out onto the stage one last time, brothers in music and in life. The crowd was on its feet before they even reached the microphones, and Kenny felt a peace he had never known before. "Thank you," he said to the audience. "Thank you for taking this journey with us. And thank you for proving that it's never too late for a miracle." The opening notes of Brothers on the Highway filled the auditorium, and two voices, one famous, one not, but both carrying the weight of a lifetime of experience, began to sing. Two strangers on a lonely road, one broken down, one passing by. But destiny had other plans, written in the evening sky. We are brothers on the highway, family found along the way. Sometimes the greatest gifts in life come from the chances that we take. As the song ended and the curtain fell, Kenny Rogers and Robert Patterson stood together, brothers who had found each other through the magic of music and the kindness of strangers. Their story would be told for generations to come. A reminder that family comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most important journey is the one that brings us home. In the end, they had learned what Kenny had always known, but had forgotten in his years of fame. The greatest songs are not the ones that make you famous, but the ones that make you whole. And on a highway in Tennessee, two brothers had found their way home to each other. One broken down car, and one act of kindness at a time.